So the body of work I'm going to present tonight is called Back to Work. And, you know, when COVID hit back in March, my wife and I kind of, like a lot of people, just kind of hid in our home. Didn't do much, barely ventured out, barely went to the grocery store. But after about 6, 8 weeks of that, I started getting really antsy. So I decided to, with brainstorming with a couple of friends of mine, decided to go out there and see what was going on. What was it like to be working during a time like this? So I created this body of work called Back to Work, where I went out and did some street photography. Now, to give you a little background, okay, this thing isn't clicking through. Let's see what we can do about that. Okay, I'm all frozen here.
There you go, Zave.
What's that?
I can see you.
No, but you can't, my screen is not moving.
Oh.
I can't go to the next slide. Here we go. Let me try this again. Sorry, folks. It all worked during the test on Monday. And of course, tonight it is not working. That is bizarre. One more trial here. And wow. My keynote froze up. Give me one. I'm not sure how to do this now. Okay. Keynote. Frank, why don't you let Donna go and give me a few minutes so no one's hanging here and figure out why suddenly my keynote's not working. Did you hear that, Frank?
Donna.
Yeah, I think it's just you and me, Zave.
Yeah, I'm.
No, I can hear you.
There, we see you.
We see you. We can hear you. It's just your screen is not.
Oh, now it's working.
Okay, get it back on. Share screen.
That's cool. And then we can watch everybody who's sitting looking at the screen, eating and drinking. That's even very cool. See how you.
But now share your screen, and that should do it.
It should. Let's see what happens, folks.
Yeah.
There we go. And if I hit play, hopefully it will play. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So, you know, my background is basically a commercial guy. Spent the last 30 years shooting for, you know, various clients like a lot of the pharmaceuticals, a lot of financials, lifestyle and portrait photography. And it's been a long time since I've done any street photography at all, or any photography that wasn't set up and produced and directed or whatever. So I ventured out in the street, and the first place I went was a little town center about 2 miles from where I live called Media, PA, and basically to see what was going on there. Masked up, went out there, and of course the first person I see is this woman who was working as a nurse in a pediatric center. They had like an outdoor area for people to be screened before they let them into the office. And this is kind of what I found in media. I was also fascinated and did a lot of photography of the stuff that COVID created, you know, like this fashion mask on the street, which I found so interesting. The leftovers of COVID, maybe.
Don't see those.
I also got really fascinated by signage because, you know, you have a company like this is Burger King, who probably spent a fortune hiring designers to design their storefronts and such. But during the time of COVID, they had to improvise, they had to put up warnings and this and that. And I found how that worked out to be visually fascinating. This guy wasn't working. He was just basically doing his laundry in a laundromat, and I asked him if he felt safe being in there. And he said, yeah, what the heck, why not? Right up the street from the laundromat's the regional post office, and a bunch of guys were outside masked up, sorting through their boxes of stuff for delivery. I asked this guy how he felt being out here, if he felt safe. And he's answered, I believe in God, I'll be safe.
So Zave, I have to ask you, for being a commercial shooter, everything set up, hair and makeup, all of that, how is it, to all of a sudden be a photojournalist where you're running around and just, getting guys in the street?
I find it to be fun. It was relaxing in some ways. I got to know almost everyone. I didn't photograph anyone that I didn't have permission to. I'd walk up to them. I say, hey, I'm Zave Smith. I'm a photographer. I'm doing a little documentary on these crazy times that we're living in. And would you mind talking and letting me shoot a portrait? So that gave me an opportunity to get to know anyone, and I think it's why these portraits have a certain sense of intimacy to them. And if someone said no, I just walked away. It wasn't going to make a deal out of it. But most people said yes.
And you were comfortable with that, with not having an assistant, no one working with lights and all of that? Was it a sense of freedom as well?
Yeah, I didn't have to pay anyone after the shoot.
Zave. Nice.
No, I actually enjoy that aspect of photography as much as I enjoy being the big shot on set with the crew. To me, it's really all about the pictures and picture creating. Sometimes you need lots of people around you to help create that image. You need the right clothing, you need the right makeup, you need the right set. And sometimes you go out there and you encounter life, and life itself becomes your set. And you just keep your eyes open and your heart open. I think the most important is keep both your eyes and your heart open to what's going on and tell a story. And it's really no different except for production values. This guy ran a pizza parlor, and his big money usually was for the lawyers because he's just down the block from the county courthouse. And he said his business at this point was about 25% of normal. Plus he hated being masked up with the hot ovens. So after I got my confidence shooting in the local neighborhood, I went into Center City, Philly, and I shot various neighborhoods. I started with a neighborhood called Market East, which basically goes from City Hall down to the Delaware River. Most of the people I encountered were working outdoors. They were either security people, construction people, maintenance people, and restaurateurs, and a few doctors and such. But, the office workers weren't there. The schools were all closed. So these were mainly the people who were occupying Center City, Philly in this time period. I love this little group shot. They were all into being photographed. This guy, his business was really tourist dependent. He's not too far from Independence Mall. So he had two businesses, the pizza parlor, and he had a thing called Big Pedal Tours, where you put a bunch of drunks on this big box with a canopy on it and wheels, and they all pedal and get drunk. And obviously both businesses were not happening back in May. This is actually one of my favorite coffee shops in Philly, over on Third and Market, called Menagerie. They make a really, really good cappuccino. And talking to her, I asked her what it felt like to be working during the pandemic. And her answer, which I heard from several people, was she just felt really good being able to be there for the community. This is Washington Square Park, and was one of the doctors taking a little break from work, catching up on paperwork, being outside. Next area I went to is the Market West area, which basically goes from City Hall out to Amtrak's 30th Street Station. This is a very famous Philadelphia thing called Reading Terminal Market. I shot this probably around 11:30 in the day during lunchtime. Normally, this place would be cheek and jowl with people. It'd be just crazy with people. Obviously, it was just a few hardy folks and a security guard. That's me. This is 30th Street Station at 8:30 in the morning. Again, in normal times, it would be jammed with people catching trains to DC or up to New York or Boston. I asked these folks how it felt to be there now. He says it's lonely, and hopefully the crowds will be returning soon.
So, Zave, I mean, it'll sound like a dopey question, but how is it to shoot real people?
You know, in some ways it was easier. You know, I mean, even when I'm working with talent and models or executives, because I do a lot of executive portraiture, I tend to just let people present themselves. Unless I have a real need to really direct someone, I kind of like sometimes to step back and see what they'll do. Because I think the gesture, how someone carries himself, how they express their face, but just like what they do with their body can be very, very expressive. So even when I'm on set on a big commercial shoot, I will direct at times, and at times I'll just get really quiet and just let someone like breathe into it and relax and present themselves for who they are. Again, some of the things that we found around town, I guess this week we passed 250,000 deaths. I wish the date of this newspaper showed.
That wouldn't be hard to find.
No, I'm sure it isn't, but I just wish in the photo it had the date.
Yeah.
This is the Apple store on Walnut Street in Philly. Again, normally jammed. This is before retail reopened. In the last couple of years, I've had a few photos I've shot where I have this wonderful layering of things, the reflections. And when they work, they really work well. These three guys in their fancy suits were doormen at a high-end hotel and condo. I asked them how busy they were and if the people who lived there were there, and they said, no, the place is pretty empty. We have very little to do, but we have to be here every day. This is Suburban Station in Philly. This is probably towards the late afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock. Again, normally this place would be filled with people.
Dave, is this over like what period of time?
I started shooting in mid-May, and I finished this project about a month ago. So most of the bulk of the work was done from mid-May to, let's say, the 1st of July.
And what signifies for you the project is over?
I felt like I was done. I hit the point where I felt I wasn't adding anything anymore. Because of the nature of who I was photographing, you know, retail people, security people, restaurateurs, after a while, I didn't feel like I was adding to the story. It just felt finished.
Yeah.
But I'll show you where it's going. It's at the end. I asked this police officer or SEPTA security guy what it was like during the pandemic. He said, you still have to police. The next area of town I went to is the Italian Market in South Philly. Some people call it the 9th Street Market, but it's mainly known as the Italian Market. It is an old street market in Philly, lots of food on the street. It's a really interesting area because right now it's made up of old school Italian, recent immigrants from Asia, African-American entrepreneurs, and a lot of Latino entrepreneurs also. So you basically have 4 different ethnic groups running this area of chaos. This is one of the more established places in the Italian Market, is a fish store on the corner of 9th and Washington, whose name I do not remember. I actually photographed him about 5 years ago when the Pope came to visit Philly. We were shooting some spots for the campaign to promote the Pope's visit, and we shot in his store, and I photographed him for that campaign. This is a couple years later, and he's still at it. When I asked this guy at this pizza shop what it was like to work, and again, he had a very similar answer. He just said, I feel a tremendous amount of neighborhood support, and I'm glad I can be here for the community. The people were actually pretty friendly. I think they're, we all are used to a certain, especially people who work public facing jobs, are used to a certain amount of interaction in any given day, and that's kind of gone. And so when anyone comes up and says hello, they're just like almost, thrilled to talk to someone. Again, this is some of the crazy signage I saw. This is obviously a Mexican restaurant. And that's the inside of it. He was very, very proud of his business. Very proud. You could see it just through the mask. One of the things I kept thinking about is I spent some time living in Israel back in the 70s. And this really reminded me of shooting Muslims because, with Muslims, with the face coverings and stuff, really all you can see are the eyes. And I keep thinking about that during this time of COVID, that you have to tell the story basically through people's eyes. After I got done with the Italian market, I went up to the Temple University area. It's interesting because Temple's actually a client of my design firm. So I've been up on the campus a little bit in the last few months. When I visited Temple, this is probably in mid-June. It was a nice warm day. All I saw was a smattering of faculty, a few students, security people, and maintenance people. It's a campus usually with 40,000 kids on it. I just love this guy's little truck with the ladder on it and his tool belt. I just thought it was so cute. He was a very sweet guy too. In Philly, we have some neighborhoods have a thing called, oh God, I forgot the legal name for it. Basically, where the shopkeepers in that neighborhood pay a little extra tariff or tax to have the streets cleaned and polished and a higher level of civic services to make their shopping area nice. And he was one of the street cleaners of this particular neighborhood. And I'm thinking, here's a guy who is on one of the lowest castes of American life. And yet he was one of the happiest people I've ever met. He was just a joy to sit and talk to for a few minutes. This guy had a locksmith thing. He was out there repairing someone's, it was plumbing, plumbing service. These two guys said they've been manning this truck, this vegetable truck, since the 80s, for about 30, 40 years now. Business was very off. They didn't have the students buying their fruits and vegetables. Nice pineapples. And this is the last shot I shot up near Temple University. I thought between the white BMW and the boarded up place, it just said everything I needed to say about the time period.
Yeah, that's a perfect shot then. Yeah.
So then I was really curious what it's like to work in, companies that are actually functioning. And the First Look Display Group happens to be a client of my branding company, Exhilarate. So I called them up and said, hey, you mind if I come up and take some photos? I knew they were operating. So we went in there and saw what it was like to work in. They're basically a fabrication shop, works mainly in metal and plastic, making signage for people. But during the COVID time, they were going to close down, and their clients started calling up and said, hey, we don't need a sign, but can you make dividers for us? So they suddenly pivoted from making signage for companies to making, dividers that restaurants and bars and other companies can use to isolate their workers. I actually operated a drill press back in the 70s for a couple months.
Yeah, Zave, looking back, do you wish or do you reconsider not getting any interviews?
I actually shot almost about 20% of the people. I actually shot some footage.
Well, you did.
And recorded little interviews. The problem I have is the audio quality was not very good. So I actually had them up on my website for a little while. I enjoyed them, but I must admit I'm a little better still photographer than videographer at this stage of my career. You know, so that's, I don't know. I just enjoy the stills a bit more.
No, but any regret though?
No, not really. Not really. I think if I could go back with a sound guy with me, that would be really cool. But to do really good video and really good sound at the same time at the level I would want it to be done at is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Especially in these little you got to remember, these people are all in the middle of their workday.
Right.
They couldn't give me a lot of time. It wasn't like we made appointments and I went there with the 2020 crew or the 60-minute crew and we set up an interview. These people were in the middle of their workday. Their boss is 20 feet away. So, I got a minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes tops, which with any one of these people.
Right.
From there, I went to the 69th Street shopping district in Philly. Again, 69th Street is a very interesting area because it's a very multi-ethnic part of town. So when you go through these shops, they really service, many, many different immigrant communities. She sold basically beauty supplies. She was a little suspicious. I found the Asian folk were probably the most suspicious of me, of any of the groups I photographed. She sold stuff for nurses. So she had, stethoscopes and shoe coverings and nurses' outfits and things like that. What I found really interesting about these stores is how much merchandise they would jam into, the couple hundred square feet they had. This barbershop had just reopened, and he was very happy to be back to work. I asked her, it was a fashion boutique, women's fashion, how safe she felt. And she said she felt very, very safe. But every time I look at this photograph, all I see is apprehension and fear. And that could be a reaction to me and not the COVID, but, we'll leave it. Another person in that store, I just love this woman's attitude of she was someone who obviously really enjoyed doing what she was doing. This guy had a men's fashion boutique and had some really good hats. And I almost bought a couple off him, but I kept thinking to myself, where am I going to wear them? He sold essential oils. And I just love the texture and color of his skin. It's just fascinating and beautiful. The 69th Street Market is also a big transit hub here in town. From there, I went over to 52nd Street area. Now, it sounds, for someone who's not familiar with Philly, that would just be a few blocks away, but it's actually on the other side of town. This area was very hard hit by the post Floyd George riots. And when I was there, it was about 6 weeks after that, and the shops were just reopening. They got looted, they got burned. It was a tough situation for these merchants. The 52nd Street area has a lot of Muslims in that neighborhood. This guy basically sold women's fashion to the Muslim community. He was a guy who had a contracting business. Again, really happy and very proud of what he was doing. Street vendor in that neighborhood. It was a bookstore, and when I walked in this place, he was shooting a little film of himself talking about this book, which I just thought was fantastic. So I tried to line up the shot and somebody could see his camera and him almost like demoing what he was doing. One of these, again, these layers of reflections, which I find so fascinating when they work. He had an income tax service. So this time of year, he normally wouldn't be that busy anyhow, but he had just reopened. That's the inside of his shop. So normally during the income tax season, I have 10, 20 guys working for me. So after going through the 52nd Street area, which is probably one of the most poor shopping districts in Philly, I thought, what would be the opposite of this? And I thought, King of Prussia Mall. So I went out to the King of Prussia Mall. It was very strange because I fully expected that within about 5 minutes of being there, some security guard would kick me out because malls are private property, so you have no rights to be in there. I was there all afternoon. No one bothered me. I was very surprised. That's the security guard. He didn't see me. It was one of the few times I photographed someone who I didn't ask permission. Or empty shop. I had a wonderful time talking to this guy. He used to be a middle school teacher, but now has had this comic book shop for the last 10 years. Had a lot of interesting insights into the people who buy comics. A jewelry repair guy. A little overview of the mall. I must admit, I was very surprised how busy it was. I expected this place to be empty. I'm not one who goes to malls hardly ever, so I had nothing to gauge it on. But people seem to like going to malls. I've always wondered just how many going out of business signs you need so people know if you're going out of business or not.
That'll look like it's covered.
She sold balloons, had one of those little carts in the middle. When you're dealing with these retail places, you really can't get into, if you're going to ask permission, the chains, because the first thing they say is they have to talk to the manager, and then the manager's got to talk to the regional manager. And by the time you're done with that, you've aged 10 years. So, but these independent, like small stores or carts or kiosks, you can actually work with these people. Ice cream shop owner. This guy repaired phones, basically the glass, if you shattered the glass on your phone. So by this time it is probably mid-June, and it was just, I shot this right before or after 4th of July weekend. I would have to go look at my records to know. During the summertime, Philadelphia decamps to the Jersey Shore. Most families have the same place they rent year after year, same week, same house. The whole clan goes down there. And one of the more interesting Jersey Shore communities is Wildwood. And I find Wildwood fascinating because it's really, again, a very multi-ethnic working class community where if you go just a little further north to Stone Harbor or Avalon, you're basically dealing with very upper middle class communities. So I went and spent the afternoon photographing the people who are working in Wildwood. I must admit, my wife and I do not spend a lot of time down the shore, and the once or twice I've been to Wildwood, I had a little bit of a snob attitude towards the place because it's, very down market, a little bit dirty. When I went this time, I just felt loved. I just felt like the people were so happy to be there and so friendly. It just was a very warm experience, very enriching.
So did you just say you were a snob, Dave?
Yes, I did.
That's what I thought I heard.
Yeah. I'm very snobby about a few little things, about scotch, about coffee, and who I hang out with, I guess. Not really, but yeah, a little bit. I'm a photography snob, that's for sure. These two guys were from, I believe, Poland, working there for the summer. And they just had the best smiles. You just gotta love people like this. Police officer, and I will say that the mask went on when the camera became visible. This guy and his partner, who I have a photograph in a moment, were from somewhere in the South. First time they had worked Wildwood during the summer, and they just kept saying, "We love it here, and we're coming back next year." And they had one of these booths where you throw a dart and you maybe win a prize. Again, I was just fascinated by how much stuff you could stick into a store. And this guy had owned the store for about 20 years and was quite proud of it and loved being a retailer in Wildwood. You gotta love people who love what they do. I'm a sucker for curly hair. What can I say? This guy was a absolute brilliant sideshow barker. You know, he had one of these booths where you spray this water pistol, and if you get the target, you win a prize. And he was so masterful and full of energy, and just sucked money out of people's pocket in such a smooth way. You had to admire it. This was a little I found disturbing. It is you shoot paint guns, and their claim to fame, their shtick is that you get a live person to shoot your paint gun at. And why it would be more thrilling to shoot a person versus just a target, I don't know, but it obviously works for them. I just love the color of this guy's skin and the texture and the paint's coming off. He was wearing this really heavy duty plastic or rubber outfit, and it must have been just uncomfortable as all hell in there, you know, between the heat and the rubber and the whole thing. Nice guy though. This guy was very practiced at being photographed. This is another guy, ran this henna and tattoo parlor, and just loves what he does. And I think his smile kind of shows that. Like a lot of these people, their love for what they do was in Wildwood was contagious. And with that, I'm almost done, but I have one more thing. I once read, I don't remember who the author was, but he talked about the most important thing that you do when you finish writing a book is the next morning you sit down with a blank page and you write your next one. You start your next book. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as I said earlier, I felt like this project was done, but I pivoted it now, and I'm starting a new project, which the first shoot was today. Them calling The Show Must Go On. And I'm basically reaching out to a bunch of different regional theater companies here in Philly and photographing people who were going to be in a show and can't be in a show because the theaters are closed. So this is my first one of this series. She plays a character in an absurdist theater called The Old Woman. And in the play, the old woman's always standing on bar stools or on chairs when she gives her lines. So that's The Old Woman, and that's the beginning of my next project.
All right, when that's done, you have to come back and show us how that turned out.
Well, hopefully it would be about 6-8 months.
That's about
Keep my interest for more than a week or two.
That's perfect time.